Hello, everyone. We are back, and now we are with Marisa Silva. Marisa is the Chief Community Officer of our PMO Global Alliance community and also a member of the advisory board. So thank you very much, Marisa, for accepting our invitation. It's a very special moment for our community, right?
It is indeed.
And so I will, let you start. And we are almost at the end of our event. We still have two sessions after this one, but they are very, very brief sessions. So the next one will be we will introduce our hub leaders, right? So you will have a chance to know all of them. And finally, we have a thank you note from our hub leaders. So thank you, Marisa, again. You can let me see just a second. Yes, feel free to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Americo, and thank you also to organizing committee for having me. It's a great joy to be here in this important moment, as Americo was saying, when we are launching the Indian Country Hub for the PMO Global Alliance. As part of my session, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I see the PMO world transitioning. So what are the changes, not just in the business world around us, that would shape how the PMOs will perform, how they are defined, but also that transition in the PMO itself, and what are my expectations for the future based on my role as a PMO advisor, a PMO consultant, and also a PMO trainer. So we are going to start by seeing how change is useful for us all. So I bring you some examples, and I'm going to challenge you to try to guess who those individuals that I'm going to share on my screen are. So the first one, so that would be George Clooney. I'm sure that you got that one right. Then you also have Amy Winehouse in the middle of the screen. If your guess was Steve Jobs, that is right. Angelina Jolie. And finally, will you guess this one? So that is Tom Cruise. Well, change is good most of the time for all of us. And change is also positive in the world of PMOs. We are going to see how that is a reality in practice, and also how the environment surrounding the PMO, that positive change has been demonstrated as well. Well, sometimes the event that causes it is not positive, but still the outcome would be. If you look into the business world that surrounds where PMOs operate, my view is that we have moved far. So we have moved from an economy of services to an economy of projects, where everything nowadays is a project almost. We have the projectification of society. We have projects of increasing complexity, increasing dimension, and we have even mega projects nowadays. Also, the role and the competencies of project management, they are no longer just seen as a specialist competency. Project management is now as important as knowing maths at school or knowing how to speak a language. We need to speak the language of projects. So project management is now a competency that is relevant for everyone. When it comes also to the role of PMOs, we can see the PMO role moving from an administrative role to a more strategic one. The PMO is no longer just the ones that are taking the meeting minutes or that are populating the risk registers, updating a project schedule. Instead, we now have a much more strategic responsibility to play. We sit in the grown-up table, as they say, in the way that we are looking into the whole portfolio. We are enabling the capabilities that are required by the project teams, and also we are shaping what would be that portfolio to be delivered, trying to identify what is the best balance in terms of risk, resources, return, what is also the portfolio that is optimal, that delivers the best results. So much more strategic in what it entails. As a result, the PMO is moving gradually to not just be seen as an overhead, central cost center, but a service. And I want to emphasize that word, PMO as a service, in the way that now we do have customers, not just stakeholders, but customers who require service from us. And changing that mindset really puts a different focus on the PMO and on the services, the service catalog that we provide, on how we interact with those customers. I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. As a result of that growth of the profession, we can now see the role of the PMO, or the career of the PMO, as a profession on its own. Or we are starting to gradually see that. It's not manifested fully, but I can see some seeds growing in that regard. Some years ago, the PMO was very much seen as just a supporting role, not as of much importance. And in fact, there were individuals who would start the PMO only as a way to then become a project manager. Nowadays, as a PMO trainer, I actually see the opposite. Many project managers wanting to be part of the PMO. And as Aris was saying before, although a project manager can be a good PMO manager, that is not an obvious transition. There's not a linear relationship there. And in fact, different competencies would apply, given that the PMO would require a much more holistic view of what is the environment of the organization and the projects and programs that are being delivered. As a consequence also, we can see that the PMO and project management in general is not now an emerging industry, but is actually a maturing industry. We have project management, or modern project management, if you prefer, as an established practice with body of knowledge available, with certifications, with a career, and that is reflected in the PMO as well. And a good example of that is indeed the PMO Global Alliance, offering you that central community for us to discuss what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in the profession and in the industry that is associated with it. So we are indeed evolving. There are, however, some pains of growth, some challenges associated with it. One of them is that now decisions have become much more complex. Nowadays, we have so much variety of options that it's difficult to know what is right for our context. If we can think of the world of project management, we have PMI, we have the APM, we have Prince 2, Lean Six Sigma, we have also Scrum, a variety of options for delivery of those projects and programs, and also for the direction and management of such programs. And then, of course, all the variety of flavors that we have for Agile nowadays. So it's much more difficult to understand what makes sense, going from best practices to best fit practices. What fits us, our maturity level, our context, our capability and capacity as well as an organization. At the same time, we were hit with unexpected events. And Tagat in the beginning talked about DANCE as an acronym. I'm sure you all recognize VUCA as well. And what the world of today tells us is that it is indeed very volatile, changing all the time, uncertain in the way that we cannot predict it, very complex as well in the way that there are so many parts at play, and it's difficult to understand what is the relationship between them, and ambiguous, because there might be signs out there, but we cannot make sense of what do they mean until we're actually hit by them. That was also visible in the context of the pandemic that we are facing. And please allow me also to express my sympathy to the situation in India, which I'm aware that is not the best one at the moment. So let's keep strong. Let's all be positive. But this context requires us also to start thinking of the world in a different perspective. If we cannot change the reality, we need to change how we perceive that reality. We need to be able to adapt. And that means getting comfortable with being uncomfortable all the time, understanding that this is now our new normal. and we'll need to respond. We need to understand how to be resilient, how to build new competencies to adapt to such an uncomfortable world. As a response to those, I'm bringing you some examples of responses that I believe are appropriate. I'm going to explore just a couple of them, not all, as suitable for the situation that we are experiencing now, with COVID in particular. I'm sure none of us had a pandemic in our project risk registers, or at least I didn't. So having now this context where we are all working remotely, where we quickly needed to understand how we were going to do assurance on our projects, where we cannot simply knock on the door of our sponsor and ask what is the status, or to the door of the project manager. So we had to learn new ways of working. On the screen then, I mentioned that agility would then be a suitable competency to respond to that volatility. So being quick to respond, to adapt. Foresight as a way of opening avenues of possible scenarios. Being aware or mindful that the future is not a linear and single route, that there are so many possibilities, some that are more plausible than others, and understanding what that can mean for our companies and also for our portfolios of projects and programs. Then also systems thinking as a response to complexity, to allow us to have a much more holistic understanding of how those parts collaborate with each other. And finally, sense making as an opportunity to then make sense of what are those signs that we have around us. When it comes to PMOs in particular, we demand more foresight at this point in time. We have been hit by this unusual situation, and we have been hit where it hurts the most, which is our security, the security of our families, and also the security of our businesses. So we need to have this ability to inspire confidence in our projects and programs. So that is one of the things that the PMO would be doing more now that we have that experience of what this new normal looks like. That can be done in different ways, like for instance, by doing project and program assurance in a more effective way, and also by considering scenario planning and using that information to build resilience, to instill resilience into our portfolios. Also, we are craving humanity. Think about it. Nowadays, we spend most of our time in front of our laptop doing meetings on Zoom, Teams, whatever that is. We miss touch, we miss the handshake, we miss the ability to confirm that we are still people, that we have needs, that we have expectations, that we have fears. And also the mental health of those individuals. Before, we might be working as a team in a co-located site. Nowadays, we have dispersed teams where we might not be able to see right away what are the struggles that an individual is facing. Working at home with children screaming all the time, with people knocking on the door, many distractions. So confirming our humanity, or at least enabling that collaboration, that humanity, bringing people together, is something that the PMOs can do and that I would recommend doing in such uncertain times. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember what PMOs are about, why they are needed. So why a PMO? Well, different reasons. Some of them I've been mentioning briefly already, but let's just summarize it as a reminder. Because at the end of the day, nowadays, everyone is managing projects. However, not everyone has the necessary competencies. And with so many choices available, it's difficult to know what should I invest my time, my effort on. Also, we want to manage our tasks however we like, with the flexibility that we want. If I want to use the 5-case model for business cases, or if I want to use the Kanban board to manage my status, I should be able to. However, if I don't have that experience, those previous competencies that I referred, if there is no guidance available, I won't be able to know what works best. So I'll be learning the hard way. In fact, we don't want to repeat our mistakes. So if there is no a central place where that knowledge is available, an entity to distribute that knowledge, again, we are left in a situation where we are learning on our own, which is not the more effective way of learning, or at least not the quickest. We also want to assign resources where they are needed the most. Yet many organizations, they lack proper demand and capacity management. They don't know who is working on what unless they actually go and search for all the different silos to get that answer. They don't know who is available for the projects that are still in the pipeline. They don't know if they need to hire more people next month. So they are missing that visibility. And ultimately, want to be able to make better decisions. However, how can this be done if we don't know what is the impact of those decisions, if we don't know how our projects are performing, or what are the dependencies between them? So those would be the type of challenges that the PMO can address. But what makes a PMO? Is it a department? Is it an individual? Well, personally, I'd say it doesn't matter as long as you have those competencies available. Because even if you have those competencies distributed, so dotted around the business, providing that you have a community of practice, for instance, that would still answer those same challenges that I was showing you before. Ultimately, however, I would say there are 5 principles that define what makes a PMO a PMO. The first one is that PMOs are instruments of integration. They bring people together, that humanity that I was referring to. They bring processes together from the different departments, being the one-stop shop for anything that has to do with project management. So they are a focal point of those best practices. They also integrate lessons. They integrate those processes from other departments. So they are that radiator of information in the organization, the silo breakers. Also, a PMO would be a PMO if it is a trusted source of truth, or at least doing its best to be the trusted source of truth. That means that if I want to know what is the status, the health of my portfolio, I should simply ask the PMO and I should be able to get that answer right away. So just a single source rather than multiple views of the project, depending on who you ask. Also, the PMO would be the one that serves the customer. So we are using an approach of servant leadership, where we acknowledge that the PMO is not a bunch of individuals, very competent, very talented, that are in that ivory tower dictating what the world of projects in that organization should look like. No, we are a service. We need to know who our customers are. Project teams, project managers, the finance team, the procurement team, other departments, the senior leadership team, regulators even, and sometimes also external clients, or ultimately the community. And understanding what do they want from us. Knowing those expectations, we would then build our service catalog to meet those needs and those expectations. But we need to know who they are, first of all, and not just simply realize that they might have an interest and be impacted by the PMO, but instead that they have fears, that they have expectations, that they have real wants and real challenges that where the PMO can contribute to, can address those. So it's a total different mindset from simple stakeholder engagement. Then also the PMO would be a real PMO if it is enabling capability. And this is more important than ever now that we are facing that new normal, now that we have so much tools out there. So it's not enough to have those tools. We need to know when to use them. And the PMO can have then an important role in building and enabling, giving those tools and those processes sorry, not those processes, those instruments of how to understand which is the most suitable one. Also, supporting the learning organization would be the fifth principle. So that would be our responsibility in the PMO to do knowledge transfer. That projects, they are not starting from scratch, but that they are using that knowledge that is available in the organization. Lessons documented, lessons observed are not the same thing as lessons learned. So putting the organization into that mindset and facilitating that knowledge transfer between teams, between projects, would be another principle that should guide the performance of the PMO. That change in the mindset is also reflected in the PMO overall and how we perceive PMOs nowadays. Until very recently, where the PMO was seen as that cost center, as also an administrative function, I would say that the PMO was the center of the universe almost, operating more on a control and command approach, where we are constantly demanding stuff from our customers. Give me the status report, give me timesheets, this is the framework that you put together, now go and use it, and then taking notes from meetings as an example of the administrations around the PMO. So continuously demanding. It's no wonder then that sometimes there is this tension between the PMO and the customers, if that is the way how the PMO is operating and how it is perceived. Instead, we need to have an outward-looking approach, not so much focus on ourselves, but what our customers might want from us, and being humble enough to ask rather than making assumptions. Only once we know what are the challenges that they're experiencing, we can then walk on their shoes and walk the talk, not just being a method of setting up a framework and saying, this is the great idea that I had, now go and use it, but instead co-creating the PMO with those customers, taking them on the journey with us. No one destroys what one helps to build. So if you are humble enough to ask those questions, to co-create the PMO, I'm sure you'll have better results on your journey. So from this perspective, we now move into a view of the PMO that is oriented towards our customers. Hence, the kind of questions that we are asking are also different. We are asking about the value that we are delivering. Are we doing the right projects? Also, the benefits. Have we achieved the benefits or not, rather than just being so transactional and operational? Methods, tools. The PMO and the world of projects is much more than that. Also, engagement. Are our customers happy? That should be the question that should be in your mind all the time. And finally, walking on or operating the approach of servant leadership, we should be asking, how can I help you? Not simply demanding from our customers. That is reflected also on how we deal with frameworks. As I mentioned before, we are surrounded by lots of choice. And I just want to stress that my view is that we need to see simply whatever works. Do a sort of project management bricolage, as I like to call it. So rather than being blindly following a methodology, a method, we need to see what works best for us, for our organization, for our maturity, for the level of change that we are introducing as well. So there's no harm in you combining those different tools, those different practices from different methods, providing that you know what is their purpose. How do they fit together? So you just mix them and mix and match as if they were Lego pieces. Having self-organized teams, also having Prince2 principles, applying Kanban boards, having the ProSci practices at the end for change management. You can also have some facilitation with legal serious play, whatever those are. But not just having a project is a project syndrome, and this is a method that I'm going to follow, but instead seeing how you can put those pieces together. There is a saying or a joke that says that it's easier to deal with a methodology, with a terrorist even, than with a methodologist, given that those methodologists they don't want to negotiate. So that's not the approach that we should take. We need to see what works best for our projects and for our organization. And then also applying that that philosophy to the whole organization. The world is changing, and the PMO should be the first one to lead that change, to lead by example. So from the organization transformation that Aris also mentioned, we are moving towards a world where we are focusing on purpose. We want to work for organizations that have a wider sense of a mission rather than just profit. We want to work in networks and even self-organizing teams rather than just hierarchies. This also means that teams are now empowered rather than operating with the command and control approach, as I was mentioning before. And we want to experiment more. This is not to say that we don't need to plan, but we need to plan with some options available as well, being much more transparent and being comfortable with that transparency, where the culture of the organization enables individuals to actually report the reality of their projects, where we don't end up having watermelon reporting, projects that seem green in the outside, but then at a closer look in the inside, they are red. So that tells a lot from the culture of the organization and how people experience that transparency. So the PMO is an enabler, and it is an enabler also for us to change that mindset. And I want to focus on that mindset aspect, given that sometimes people do start by focusing on the tool set, because actually that's, I would say, the easiest. And that's also where you would find your quick wins. They might be quick wins, but that is not to say that they are going to be sustainable in time. So that process management, when it comes to change, it's usually where we see organizations starting in their maturity journey, where the volume of work and investment is the highest, but over time, it's not where you'll find the highest return on investment. If you want to change how an organization operates, you need to focus on the mindset instead. Hence the role of the PMO in leading the way, in being that enabler, that facilitator towards the change within the different project teams and within the other departments. Ultimately, I believe that PMOs must go or they must grow, as Colin Ellis once said. That means that the PMOs need indeed to reinvent themselves. There is some natural selection in the way that if the PMO is not showing its value, if it's not continuously demonstrating that it does add to the organization, then it might be better to just stop it, to start from scratch, to ensure that we have the right mission, the right positioning, and then build it from there. So we cannot afford to lose time, particularly when time is short in this new pandemic. We had this great example of the vaccination program, probably the biggest project or program actually ever, where countries were collaborating, were rushing to find a vaccine. For the pharmaceutical industry, that would be a case study, but I would argue then this is even the biggest mega project ever, the one that the priority was so high that we couldn't afford any errors. So the same would apply for PMOs in this case. We cannot afford to have waste. We need to focus on the right things. In summary then, what could be next for PMOs? What can the future hold if we now start to think ahead? Well, the professionalization of PMOs. And the fact that you are here attending this event today is a sign of exactly that. We also talked about the certification from the PMO Global Alliance, the PMO Career Week that is going to happen very soon. So all those are signs of how the industry is growing and how the PMO is now a career on its own right. Also, I believe that we are going to have better portfolio management. Many organizations have now seen their budgets reduced or cut the moment the pandemic hit. Think of aviation, for instance, tourism, and others. They cannot afford to just pay lip service to portfolio management any longer. They need to ensure that they have a portfolio that is robust enough to be resistant to future risks, that fits the criteria of return, minimum return requirement, and also for which there are resources available. So identifying how what those projects are, how they are going to be prioritized, I think it's something that more and more PMOs will be doing. As a consequence, we are now going to be sitting in the grown-ups table, not just being seen as an administrative function, but as a trusted partner in the business, someone that is going to operate as an advisor for the business. And this would also mean that the perception of the PMO would be one of a value-added service. If we then see how this operates in the field, this also means having project management bricolage. So having a toolkit at your disposal and then selecting what is the most appropriate one. Because in the same way, if you are doing renovating your kitchen, and if the handyman just shows up at your door with a hammer, you'll ask, where's the rest of the tools? Are you just going to fix it with a hammer? And yet we continue to do that in our organizations. So don't be afraid to mix and match as it suits. So find the best fit rather than just the best practice. And finally, focusing on that mindset shift, leading the way, showing to the others how we can promote more transparency, more collaboration, more empowerment in our teams, a PMO with a purpose as well. So being that enabler of the business transformation. With that in mind, my last thought for you is actually a challenge. So food for thought. If you think of your situation, how prepared for the future are you? Is your PMO and your organization the one shaping the future, adapting to it, not making much of an effort, but at least putting some money aside to reserve the right to play? Or are you simply not worried about the future yet? So think about it. Because the future, my friends, is happening from now. Thank you.
Excellent, Marisa. Thank you very much. A very insightful presentation. You know, we are really proud to count on you in our community, and it's a great opportunity for all of us to listen to your valuable insights and ideas. Thank you very, very much.